Warning: some contents may be disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. So this was quite a while ago. I would say about 11 to 12 when this happened. One night, we had decided to get food from a pizza place around us that was close, but not close enough that they would deliver to us. It was about 20 to 30 minutes away. The trip there was fine. We got our food and we were on our way home. But then we decided to stop at a gas station. When leaving the gas station, a dark burgundy car pulled out behind us. At first, obviously, this did not raise any red flags to us. But as we kept going and getting closer to home, this car was still following us and we were starting to get freaked out. It followed us the whole way home, and once we got home, we pulled in and this car just stopped in the middle of the road a bit behind us. My mom told me not to get out of the car, and we sat there for about 10 minutes until this car finally decided to drive past us. I was so scared, I didn't even look at the car because I didn't want to see who was in it. They turned at the next block, and then my mom told me to get out of the car and run to the house as fast as I could because she was worried that they were just going to drive around the block. We got out, ran to the house and locked the door. I don't know if they ever came back, and I never saw that car again. It was one of the creepiest things to ever happen to us. This is the first time that I've sent a story in. My life has been pretty boring in comparison to other people, but I hope that my story is something you can use. The doctor told me that I needed to start exercising more because of my health. But where I live, it gets extremely hot during the day, even during winter, so working out at nighttime is easier. I was still too embarrassed to go to the gym to exercise because I didn't want to be judged. I decided to go for walks at nighttime when it was cooler and there would be fewer people out. Even then, there were still other people out, and while it may have been safer, I still felt really self-conscious. So on a whim, I decided to go for a walk at 1 a.m., so technically it was the early morning. This was also quite a long time ago. I didn't have a mobile phone that I could take with me. I went for my walk and naturally there wasn't anyone around. And over time, I was getting used to it and I enjoyed my night walks. My neighborhood is normally quiet and has a reputation for being one of those safe ones. I walked a good distance away from my house and the occasional car drove by. Occasionally, I'd get a honk of hello by one of my neighbors and I would wave back. There were some parked cars along both sides of the street. Again, there was nothing abnormal that drew my attention or caused me to worry. I continued on my way when I saw a car slowly driving behind me. The lights were on and I gave a wave thinking that it was someone who knew me and perhaps they decided to play a prank on me. But I had a terrible feeling that they didn't have good intentions toward me. So I tried to stay in well-lit areas where I would be safe. I was about halfway home and I wanted to get home as soon as possible. I didn't want to lead whoever this was back to my house, just in case they decided to come back later on or whenever they wanted to. There was a local gas station nearby that's open 24 hours and I started to walk in the direction of it. I knew that there would be someone in there and that I'd be able to get some help. I kept checking behind me and the car kept following me. I tried changing directions to see what the person would do, and they changed lanes and kept following me. I saw a glimpse of a man in the car, but I couldn't really distinguish any of his facial features. I was beginning to get increasingly scared now, but I kept a level head. I walked to the gas station, I entered, and I spoke to the man behind the counter. I then explained to him that a car had been following me. We looked for the car, and it was gone. Well, at first, I was so relieved, but it was only when we looked around the corner that we saw the car, waiting for me to come out, and the lights were off this time, and clearly he was hiding. The man was so kind and called the police for me. I waited, and I bought some snacks. I know, counterproductive to my diet, but I needed the comfort because I was so nervous. I'm not sure how long it took for the police to come, but when they came, the other car drove away and I never saw them again. I still went on my regular walks, but I ended up going with a friend to keep me company and also for safety reasons. And I never leave without a mobile phone in case of an emergency, and I bought one soon after this happened. There was an update on the car that was following me. The car was stolen. There were women who were walking who had gone missing in the neighboring towns, who were just grabbed when they were walking either early in the morning or late at night. There were rumors that it was a serial killer of some kind, but since no bodies were found at this point, we really can't be sure whether this was true or not. From what I heard about these women, they weren't the sort to just get up and leave their families behind. So yeah, it probably isn't good. Update. Hi, sorry about the second email. I wanted to give you an update about my story, and I haven't heard it on your channel yet. One of the missing women who went out for a late walk has been found deceased and likely the victim of murder. The others who have gone missing haven't been found yet. There isn't anything specific to say that it was the same person or if it was connected, but it made me wonder what could have happened. So, I guess going to the gas station was a good idea. Everyone, please, stay safe out there. Hey, okay, I'm not sure how to begin this. This isn't one of those, "Oh, he looked at me funny in the grocery store, let's not meet" kind of story. My life was actually in danger, and I wasn't sure if I was going to make it out alive. I hate those stories where someone is looking at someone strangely, and that ends up being their story. I live on a property in a rural country town. It isn't close to the town itself and is about 15 to 20 minutes away. I can't see my neighbor's house, and they certainly can't see mine. The property is about 100 acres of land, some bushland with some paddocks, and a small garden close to the house. We have 3 guard dogs to alert and, well, to bite anyone who gets too close. And even though I'm an adult, my parents don't like leaving me at home alone at night. And before this happened, I thought that they were just being ridiculous and overprotective of me. I was settling in for the night with a movie, some popcorn, and I was waiting for a friend to come meet me. We have gates, but they're mostly left unpadlocked. Basically, the unspoken rule is if you open a gate, you close it. Mainly, so livestock doesn't get out of the paddocks. Anyway, sorry, you'll find that I tend to ramble a lot. My friend texted me to tell me that she would be running a little late. This really isn't uncommon for her. She is terrible at time management. I settled down in front of the TV. Then I heard the dogs barking. They're idiots and sometimes will bark at a mob of kangaroos jumping past, or I thought they were just excited because my friend got here. But it was aggressive, and I heard a loud yelp. I got up, and I got my crowbar ready, and I peeked out the window. I saw my dog running back to the house, limping, and I opened the front door to let him in. He was bleeding. Oh, it was on. I didn't immediately call the police because 1, it would take them a long time to get out here, and 2, I didn't want to call them if it was a feral dog or something. They will never let me live it down. It looked like someone stabbed him, but it didn't look like it hit any vital organs. I wrapped towels around him, hugged him, and I told him that it would be okay. I was starting to get really scared. When I looked back, there was a scruffy and dirty looking man standing at the window looking in. This wasn't uncommon. People would go for a walk in the bush, not understand how to get back, and then follow the nearest road. It was weird how he didn't call out and didn't look like he had been stuck outside for a while. I asked him, "Are you all right, mate?" He knocked again and said, "Can I come in?" Now, normally, if my family were home, we would do it and call the police, then the cops would drive them home or wherever. I didn't want to let a random man in the house though. My dog then started barking and snarling. He has a scary bark and it tends to keep people away. "Do you need me to call the cops, mate?" My tone was a lot less friendly and concerned this time. "No, don't call the cops. Let me in. I want to come in," he demanded, and then shook the doorknob roughly. "Fuck off," I said, and I picked up the phone and then called the police. Now, even if the cops left immediately, it would still take them a good amount of time to get to the property, and the creepy leer on the man's face told me that he must have known that too. The operator answered me, and I told her that I needed the police and there was a man trying to break into my house. But he then broke the glass with something in his hands and then tried to open the lock. I screamed and I backed up and then ran toward the back of the house and opened the door to run out. I hated leaving my dog locked in another room, but he was able to grab my arm and then yank me backward. He said something to me, but I couldn't quite make it out. We struggled for a while and he tried to pull open my shirt and I screamed, punching, biting, and kicking him. I wasn't gonna go down without a fight. My dog burst through the door, the little legend. Even when he was injured, he still came to help me. He grabbed his arm, bit down, and then shook. The man screamed so loud, and I punched the man repeatedly in his head. I didn't want to kill him. When he was on the ground, I pulled my dog off of him, and then we sat nearby. I held the knife in my hand, and I hugged my dog. He was bleeding, but it wasn't lethal. As I thought, it took the cops a while to come out. The ambulance came too, and then took care of us. He woke up, told them that I went crazy and my dog was vicious. They didn't believe him. My parents panicked when they got home, but they were happy that I handled myself. We pressed charges against him and testified. And Chief, my dog and my savior, got stitched up and is still kicking. He gets treats all the time and is spoiled rotten. We upped the security at the house just in case that it ever happens again. Well, I doubt it. But we have cameras around the place and motion lights in case that some stranger ever tries to pay us a visit. The other dogs, unfortunately, were terrible guard dogs, but that's okay. They're still beloved pets. As for the idiot who attacked me, he is in prison, and I hope that every single day he has in there is total misery. I've been a long-time listener to podcasts where people have told their scary stories or told about creepy encounters and whatnot, but I never personally expected to have one of my own. And now that I do have one, I figured, why not share it with the world and see if maybe it can be used as a lesson to others and help people avoid similar events? If nothing else, at least it can be considered entertainment to some. I live in a small town that I like to think is pretty safe. There really aren't many crimes that I hear about around town, and I've never really met anyone that I felt threatened by around town. I've been without a car for a while now, and I just walk from my house to a nearby bus stop to get to work, and then I do the same to get home. The bus stop to get home is a bit annoying because they don't stop at the same spot where they pick me up in the morning, so I end up having to walk about 25 minutes from the second stop to my apartment complex. It's a bit annoying, sure, but it is what it is. And since I don't have a car, it's all I have to rely on most of the time. Now, this whole event happened a few weeks ago. It was a normal day at work. I was super busy, and by the end of the day, I was seriously exhausted. I got to my stop, got on the bus, and I was sitting in the seat just kind of dozing off a bit while making sure that I didn't actually fall asleep. Something that I've gotten pretty good at over the couple of years that I've done this routine. And after a bit of just sitting there and being rocked back and forth by the jostling of the bus, we hit a pothole, and the bump of it actually pulled me completely out of my half-asleep state. I shook my head and kind of looked around. And when I did, I noticed that there was a guy a few seats ahead of me that was sitting with his back against the side of the wall of the bus, and he was staring at me. I don't mean like, maybe he has a crush on me type of staring. I mean, full-on glaring, like I stole his wallet and kicked his dog and he knew that it was me style of staring. I had no idea who this guy was, and I'd never seen him on this bus route before. I was a bit creeped out by it, so I just kind of thought, okay, I'll ignore it the best that I can, and that will be it. He's just kind of creepy. The entire ride to my stop, he just sat there staring at me with the same wide-eyed glare, and it got to the point where I thought that maybe he was blind and he wasn't actually staring at me, and maybe I was just being insensitive. It was such an awkward situation, and I really was trying to rationalize or think about it in any logical or even illogical way that I could. And after a while, we were approaching my stop. I was a bit hesitant to get off, but I wasn't about to make my 20-something minute walk turn into a 40 or more minute walk just because of this one guy. As we approached, I got up and I walked towards the exit of the bus, and as I passed this guy, he definitely turned his head to watch me. And much to my misfortune, as I got past his seat, he stood up and started following me. I had no idea what to do. I had already shown that this was my stop by getting up, and there weren't a lot of people on the bus, so it wasn't like I was going to be able to get anyone to help me. I decided that I could maybe mention something to the driver and they could help me about it, or stop this guy from getting off the bus with me because I was creeped out. I really was at a loss of what could be done because technically, him being a creep wasn't a crime. The second that I turned to make a comment to the driver, this guy grabbed my shirt and then pushed me toward the door, and I'm not exaggerating. He practically threw me off the bus. He grabbed me and then he shoved me with all his strength out the doors and onto the curb. I was lucky that I was able to halfway catch myself and that I didn't smack my head on the bus stop sign or the bench or anything. As I fell, this guy seriously pointed at me and said, "If I ever catch you on this bus again, I will kill you." This was obviously terrifying, and it caused a lot of chaos to ensue, mostly from the driver. He was yelling at the guy, and the couple other people that were on the bus were standing up and approaching this man that had just threatened me, and that I was just sitting there terrified for my life. As soon as the other people got to the guy, he jumped off the bus and then he took off at a full sprint. Within moments he was gone, and they were helping me up, and the driver told me to get back on the bus while he called the cops to escort me home. I was thankful that he let me back on to wait, and that he was willing to call into dispatch that there was an incident, so I wasn't there alone. The cops did come, and they asked for a description. They asked me if I knew the guy, and I told them the whole thing, that he was staring at me creepily, and then when I went to get off the bus, he shoved me and then threatened me. They didn't seem to want to believe that I didn't know the dude, but I assured them that I had never seen him before in my life. They took all the information from everyone, and then one of the officers actually did give me a ride home. That's pretty much the end of it. They haven't contacted me to let me know if there's been any progress. And my guess is that there wouldn't be, because it was such a random incident, and beyond the description, I don't know if they had anything else on this guy. It definitely scared the hell out of me, and it's actually made me a bit nervous to ride the bus again, just in case he makes good on his threat. But I'm hopeful that it was just a one-off incident, and that I never run into that crazy dude ever again. This story takes place several years ago, in the early mid-2000s. I think it was 2006, because at that time, I was living with my aunt and uncle in the middle of pretty much nowhere Midwest. I won't get into the whole why I was living with them thing, because it's not really relevant to the story. Just know that I had crappy parents, and they were the next best thing, but they really did live in what was pretty much the middle of nowhere. The town, if you could call it that we lived in had a really small population, and pretty much everyone knew everyone else. It was basically one of those small towns where if you pulled into someone's driveway, you would get met with the business end of a double barrel. On top of this, they lived on what was basically a long dirt road that literally just ended. There were no turnarounds or side roads. It was just one long dirt path with gravel on it that went the length of a few properties and then stopped at a tree line. It didn't even have one of those metal guardrails to stop you at the end. It was just a forest and a small ravine pretty much. This meant that the people that came down the road were typically just the people that lived there, or maybe were visiting someone that lived there. Very rarely did we get someone that would drive all the way down the road, find that it just ended, and then turn around to go somewhere else. Now that you have an idea of what it was like, I'll get on to what actually happened. I was 16 at that time and had recently gotten my driver's license, so I was the one that drove to the only gas station to get snacks, or would drive out to the grocery store to pick up the few things we needed. I was pretty much just taking every single opportunity that I could get to get into the car and then go, since I now legally could. This was especially true since it was summer break, because otherwise, I would just be sitting in the house with my little brother, and that was not something that I wanted to do. It was pretty early in the morning, sometime around 8 or so, because my uncle had just gotten up and was complaining that we were out of both creamer and milk for his coffee, and that he was getting grumpy because of it. I told him that I would go ahead and run to the store to get what he needed if he wanted to. He said that I could go, but then told me to take Jimmy, my little brother. I really didn't want to, but I wasn't going to fight him on it. So we got in the car, headed out down the drive and onto the road toward the main roads. A few minutes into the drive, I saw what looked like a car sitting on the side of the road with a hood up, which is also something that you don't usually see around here. I slowed down as we approached it, and I saw a man in a button-down shirt and nice pants, just kind of standing there in front of the car, looking at it like he was annoyed or frustrated. I asked him if he was okay, and he laughed, and then he walked over to my window. And here's how the conversation went. He said, "No, I'm not okay. I was driving down the road and this thing just stopped running. I don't know what's wrong with it. You wouldn't happen to have a phone that I could use, would you?" I answered, "No, I don't. I'm sorry. Were you going to see someone down this way? I could point you to their house and they could help you." Mind you, this was 2006, and most people didn't have cell phones on them at that time, much less out here. He then answered, "That's all right. Could you give me a ride up the road to the gas station so I could call someone? It's just me out here, and I don't really know where I am." This was a bit of a weird statement. He definitely looked out of place, but to be on this road usually meant that you knew where you were going. I told him, "This is my uncle's car, and I don't really think he'd want me to have a stranger in it. What I can do though, let me turn around and go get him, and let him know where you are, so he can come out this way. He actually owns a mechanic shop, so he can either tell you what's wrong, or get you towed out to the shop, and I'm sure he'll be able to fix it." But when I said this, he kind of looked upset or disappointed, which was weird to me because I was basically offering to get him a certified mechanic to look at his car for free since he was stuck here. My uncle had been working on cars for something like 30 years at this point, and there was nothing that he couldn't diagnose or fix at his shop. The guy kind of just looked around and shook his head and then leaned in and said, "Could you guys just go ahead and give me a ride? I think that would be the better way to do this." That's when my brother leaned forward and started talking. He asked, "Is that guy with you too?" and pointed towards the trees by the car. The guy looked shocked and then turned around to look at the trees, then asked in a sheepish way, "Oh, what guy?" My brother once again pointed and said, "That guy right there, behind that tree. He's been standing there for a while now. Does he need a ride too?" Now, my brother can be a bit annoying at times with how he was, but this was practically the thing that saved us in this situation. And as soon as the guy realized that we knew that the other guy was there, he didn't really seem to know what to say. And after a couple seconds of mumbling and jumping around with his words, he seemed to motion to the other guy, and as soon as I saw him start walking out of the trees with a gun in his hands, I booked it. I knew exactly what was going on here, and I knew that I needed to get as far away from this as quickly as I could. I slammed the gas pedal, and then I took off. I'm pretty sure that I actually ran over the first guy's foot on the way. After what felt like forever of driving down the road at top speed, I looked back, slowed down, and turned out onto the main road where everything was. When I finally parked in the parking lot of the grocery store, I just kind of sat there with my heart racing and panicking inside. My brother, on the other hand, was just like, "Huh? That was weird." When I was certain that I wasn't going to die from a heart attack, we got out and quickly ran into the store. I went over to the desk and asked to use their phone to call my uncle. I told him that some guys were parked on our street and one of them had a gun and that they tried to carjack us. I honestly think that they were more likely trying to kidnap us and take the car too, but I just stuck with carjacking. He then told me to stay there until he got up to the store, that he was going to call the cops. When the officer got to the store, my brother and I told him about the whole thing, and we told them about the car, the guy, and the other guy with a gun. They did a sweep of the area, but they never found any of them. My uncle said that he didn't seem to see them either when he drove down the road. My guess is that they took off when we did because they knew that the cops would be there soon. It was bizarre for them to do this in the middle of a rural area, on a road where it's just a bunch of country folk. But at the same time, I guess if you have the patience, you could get a mark pretty easily, since people out that way are always willing to stop and help. It was the only time there were any reports of anything like this, and I never saw the two guys again, which tells me that they weren't from around there. Honestly, I hope that I never do see them again. I never liked the outdoors or being in nature, and I get a lot of shit for this. I prefer to stay inside in a nice AC with all the comforts of home, rather than go outside where there is nothing but bugs, the heat, and people. I appreciate beautiful nature pictures and the scenery, but that doesn't mean that I want to be out in it. My sister, however, is the complete opposite of me. She loves the outdoors and always tries to go hiking whenever she can. I like seeing the pictures and hearing about her adventures, but that is as far as I will ever go. But for her birthday, she asked me to go on an easy hike with her. We have different ideas about what an easy hike would be. She doesn't really ask much of me, so I told her that I would give it a go, but to understand that I might not be able to do it. We were walking along the path, and we stopped regularly to take breaks. It was a beautiful place, but my feet hurt. It wasn't really my thing. We had one more trail to go down before we'd go down another one in order to get back to the car park. My sister was talking about how we should do this again sometime. I just wanted to go through the day. We weren't alone on the trails. There were families with small kiddos walking by, some couples, older people, and even the odd occasional single hiker. What I'm trying to say is that this trail isn't in the middle of nowhere and generally has the reputation for being safe. Well, I hurt my ankle somehow. I don't know how, but it ached. So my sister and I sat down for a while and chatted. And before we knew it, it was dusk. So the sky had that pink hue to it, and it was colder now. We got up and then started walking home. My legs and ankle hurt, so I was limping, and my sister was walking beside me. I knew she was itching to walk faster. She is one of those speedy people who like to walk really fast everywhere. But then we heard rustling from the trees, and then froze. Neither of us knew what it was, and we held each other's hand only for a deer to come through. You know, like a cheesy part in a horror movie. We just laughed it off and thought that it was ridiculous. But then, the birds, and just the forest in general, I guess, went really quiet. It was weird. My sister stopped and looked around to see what was causing it. She leaned close to me and whispered that we had to go. Now, I wasn't going to argue with her. Instantly, She was on her feet and pulled me up quickly. I asked her what was wrong and she told me not to worry. Just come with her and don't waste any time. We walked at a fast pace, as fast as we could go with my injury in order to get back to the car park, and she wouldn't say what was wrong. I didn't ask again and I figured that she would tell me when we were safe. She kept looking to see what was there, and as we were getting closer to the car, she told me to hurry up and just get straight in the car when it was unlocked. When we got back to the car, she told me to get in right away, and the moment we were inside, we lock all the doors. Normally, when we got back to the car after doing something, we would just talk or relax, but this time, she drove off and didn't answer my question until we drove to a local McDonald's. She pulled into a parking spot and her hands were shaking. I gave her a moment before I asked her what happened. She told me that she saw someone was watching us in the forest behind a tree. At first I thought she was overreacting because there were a lot of people there. She told me that he was naked and that he had a knife in his hand, and that's why she told me that we had to go. I asked her how she knew that it was a knife, and she said that she knew it got bright when it reflected, and then admitted that she couldn't be sure. It was just better to get out of there before it got dark anyway, than being out there when it was nighttime. Maybe we were being stalked by a psycho, or maybe a murderer. I don't know. I haven't gone hiking since, and my ankle has gotten better. She has gone hiking again with friends, but never going alone. But she has never tried to go back to that forest. She told me that she doesn't want anyone to stop her from enjoying nature. I'm a female and I'm currently 31, but this happened when I was 16. I was in a choir at my high school that performed for a lot of different events around town. One of them was to sing at the middle school sporting events. The middle school in my hometown, there is only one, is just about half a mile from my childhood home. So whenever we had events there, I would just walk. I didn't really get my license till 17. This one night, I think it was November, we had to sing at a basketball game, and it was obviously dark when I was able to leave. Normally, I wasn't allowed to walk alone at night, but for choir, I was given permission unless I felt unsafe. But there wasn't any reason to be creeped out in the first place, so I started my walk. Just down from the middle school is a stretch of road with almost no streetlights that had always creeped me out when I walked there. I crossed quickly and I had a fast pace going, as I'm a naturally paranoid human. But about 2 minutes into the dark zone, I heard rapid footsteps behind me. I at first figured that it was a jogger, but they made no attempt to pass me and they just stayed a comfortable 10-foot distance. They began whistling a jaunty tune, which at first I thought was fun. At this point, I wasn't super scared, perhaps because of the happy whistling tune, but I noticed that the footsteps began to speed up. There were no cars on the road, and given the lack of light, when I turned around all I could see was a silhouette shrouded in darkness. At that realization, I quickened my pace to barely under a run. The whistling continued, getting more breathless as this person began to run after me. I looked back to see a dark figure coming at me at full speed, and in terror, I began to run frantically as well. I will never forget those last moments running through my dark subdivision, hearing his whistling and footsteps getting closer and closer. This person followed me up to my door and I ran inside and locked the front. I checked all the doors and went to my upstairs bedroom. And from the window, I could still see a silhouette and could still hear him whistling. I slept with a knife that night. So this happened years ago when I was a dumb teen girl who loved walking the city alone after dark. This took place in Eastern Europe and, for context, in a city with a tramway system. On this one night, I sat in a tram station waiting to catch the last tram home. 3 trams stopped at the station, 2 of which went where I was going. This information would be important for later. It was around 10 p.m., and as I sat there waiting, lost in thought, I barely registered a man quietly walking up and then standing by the shelter. I thought nothing of it, just someone else waiting for the tram. Until I started feeling weird. The streets were quiet and dark and there was no one else in sight, just me and this guy. And I started wondering why he chose to stand this close to me when he had so much space to avoid dealing with people. I couldn't comprehend anyone wanting to socialize this late at night, given that I was not very social myself. So I glanced at him, trying not to overthink. He was a bald-headed, beady-eyed giant, tall, built like a bear, big belly, and big arms and legs. I was 5'2" and scrawny, but that wasn't what scared me. It was the fact that he was staring right at me, unblinking and expressionless, not even attempting to look away or act embarrassed. No. This guy wanted me to feel uncomfortable. I instantly felt weak and shaky, cold shivers down my spine. This was not normal. I realized quickly that I was not in a good situation. I couldn't miss the last tram. Walking home was out of the question, and my phone was almost dead. I was a shy kid, and I didn't have what it takes to scare this guy away. I knew that, but I had to at least try. I only managed to utter a small "Hi?" trying my best to startle him out of whatever he was thinking. But my attempt failed in the face of his silent, threatening aura. He kept staring, no sign of intent to reply. He was enjoying this. Feeling the panic rising inside of me, I told myself to stay calm and then think rationally. Maybe he didn't hear me. Minutes passed, and his stare continued to burn onto my skin, and there was no tram in sight. Ignoring him didn't also work. So I mustered the courage to speak once again, this time a little louder. "What do you want? Stop staring!" No answer. He definitely heard me this time. I felt myself start to get angry. I didn't want to let this guy get to me anymore. I didn't want to continue to give him the satisfaction of watching me squirm nervously and pretend that this behavior didn't bother me. I took a deep breath and I forced myself to start thinking. I knew what I can't do. I can't fight him off if he makes a move, and there is nothing I can say or do that will get him to stop. I didn't know what his intentions were, but I knew that they weren't good. If I tried to walk away, he would probably follow. I could run, but he would most likely catch up to me before I can tire him out, since his legs were much longer than mine. And even if I managed to somehow lose him, walking home through dark alleys, past the junkies and the gypsies that were always prowling about, could land me in an even worse situation. I could pretend to call someone, but he might feel compelled to act much sooner if he felt threatened. So, what can I do? The only thing that I could be able to do was to try and outsmart him somehow. So, I started developing a few plans, depending on which tram showed up, trying to confirm whether he was just amusing himself and actually waiting for a tram too, or popped over for other more suspicious reasons, and whether I could get any kind of help. I couldn't let him see where I lived, so if he followed me, I'd have to be prepared to employ whatever strategy available, and for that, I needed to stay rational and aware of my surroundings. While I was still thinking, the first tram showed up. It was one that I could have taken home, but this one pulled into the depot right in my neighborhood, forcing me to lead him to my home. I hoped that he would board it and leave me be, but he didn't. He kept watching me carefully. So I let the tram go, desperately hoping that it wasn't the last one to head home. He continued to watch, and I sensed that he was quite happy with how things were going. I put up with it for another 15 minutes, trying to focus on another plan of action. I could now pretend that I needed the other tram, the one going to a different area of the city, and I just ride to the next station, getting off as soon as possible so I don't end up too far and miss the tram that I need. This tram showed up next, and with my heart in my throat, I boarded it and I sat down by the door. He got on it too, but he sat himself in the back, pretty far from where I was. I let out a sigh of relief, thinking that this might still go well. When the tram reached the next station, I got up and out, not looking back and hoping that it was all over. But when I stepped on the pavement and watched the tram drive away, I couldn't see him in it. I turned my head slowly, and I was terrified to see him walking towards me, looking slightly pissed off. He stopped just a few steps away and then resumed staring, this time with a clear hint of malice, still in silence. My vision blurred as I fought back tears of despair. He was not going to let me go. The helplessness that I felt was unbearable, but I couldn't cry. I couldn't give up. I had to find a way. I had to get home tonight. The prospect of what might happen to me any time now, if I didn't, was becoming too real. My head was full of unanswered questions, regrets, and horrible scenarios. I wanted so badly to not have to think anymore, not have to fight back the tears, and stay composed. But I knew this would be his cue to enact whatever messed up plan that he had in his mind, and I couldn't let that happen. Then, I saw the final tram approach, the only one that I could take now, and I got on as quickly as my trembling legs would allow me to. When I was in, bright lights enveloping me, my mind snapped out of its nightmarish spiral of fear and allowed me a moment of clarity. I had 3 stops to figure this out. I sat down at the front and looked at the driver. He was a frail old man, blissfully unaware of my distress. Getting the driver's attention was a no-go. And then we passed one stop. There was no one else waiting to climb aboard. I turned around fully expecting to see the psycho that had followed me again. But I did not expect him to be sitting right behind me. He was not taking any chances. He was making sure that I won't try anything like last time. I shot him a hateful glare and allowed my anger to overcome my fear. I stood up and purposely walked over to another seat in the middle of the tram car. I wanted to make it clear that I will not put up with this bullshit any longer. He got up too and slowly walked up to a spot 2 seats behind and diagonally from me, and then sat down with the tiniest arrogant grin on his face. Already expecting it, I shut up and stood by the middle door instead, determined to keep him on his toes. If I stood right by the door, he won't have any idea which station I plan to get off at. He remained where he was this time, convinced that I was bluffing, After all, this was really the last tram, and there was nothing else that I could possibly do to escape now. He must have reckoned, so my defiance was just a funny act to him. This was my chance. I had to take the risk, and it had to work. There were 3 doors on the tram, and they all opened and closed at the same time and stayed open for around 5 seconds before closing again if no buttons were pressed or people detected on the threshold. The next stop, the only one left before mine, came into view. The tram slowed to a stop, the doors opened, and I made no move. 5 long seconds passed, and the doors started to close. I bolted and I ran for it, reaching the back door as fast as I could and slamming the button to open it again. My whole body tense with adrenaline, I waited a long, painful second, and then I jumped back in, keeping my head low, holding my breath and crouching behind the nearest seat. I shut my eyes tightly and I exhaled slowly while thanking the gods that I didn't believe in for that button working. I was wishing with all my might for him to not have seen me before I got back in. And as I was waiting to hear his footsteps approaching, I pictured him frantically looking for me. Was he still on the tram, face screwed up in anger, head turning like a fat, ugly meerkat? Or was he catching his breath on the pavement of the last station, mad eyes searching the darkness for me? As the tram continued its loud journey, banging and clanging in sync with my heartbeat, I dared to myself, imagining his face when he realized he fucked up. Hand on my chest, I did my best to stealthily look around the corner and found no one looking back. I stood up in excitement and I threw myself at the foggy back window. And there he was, standing alone and victimless on that slowly fading out of sight station, watching me leaving him and his vile plans behind. Giving someone the middle finger never felt so good. I made it home and told no one of my story, for fear that I'd be admonished for my naivety. But I was safe, I was proud of myself, and I learned my lesson. Creepy stranger, I hope the events of that day taught you not to underestimate girls and prevented you becoming a criminal for the rest of your life. So let's never meet again. And here's the riddle for this video. Hello everyone, it's your creepy sister here. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really appreciate each and every one of you. But I would also like to thank my amazing patrons, my top tippers, and my dearest channel members. Thank you very, very much. I really appreciate it with all of my heart. If you want to support the channel further, you could also choose to become a patron, a tipper, or a channel member. But remember, it's appreciated, but never a requirement. I would also like to announce that we have merch now. The link is in the description of the video, along with all my other social media links, like my Discord server, Twitter, Instagram, and others. You can connect with me and send your stories there. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't yet, and comments are highly appreciated. And remember, your fear feeds me.